to talk more about the growing trade relationship between the two countries, Australia's new Trade Commissioner to India, Peter Linford. So, Peter, what kind of export volumes are we talking about from Australia to India at the moment?
Well, the trading partnership in general is over $20 billion, but as an export destination, India in the last 12 months moved from 6th to 4th rank for Australia. Now, if you want to put that into perspective, if it was a 68 to 66, that would be significant, but to have a movement of that scale in the top 10 is really shows the growth that we have with India.
And what kind of things are they importing? Is it the commodities, and what commodities are we talking about?
Well, the biggest value of trade is certainly in the commodities and out of the resources sector, with the three biggest items being coal, gold and copper.
And what about iron ore? Of course, India produces its own iron ore, but they do import some Australian iron ore. Is that because the iron ore process and the mining process in India is still fairly inefficient when you compare that to Australia?
No, that's not the case. India is one of the largest exporters of iron ore in the world, and they have significant resources and it's high quality. Where the opportunity lies for Australia, though, and where there is deficiencies in India, is in infrastructure and in logistics movement. So most of the iron ore mines in India are on the east coast, and logistically moving that internally through the country is more costly than it is to actually ship iron ore from Australia. So Rio Tinto have done some shipments from Perth to the west coast of India that have delivered on global prices with the freight component and the efficiencies cheaper than what it could actually be shipped in India, which is a terrific opportunity for us.
We talk a lot on this show about the China growth story and, of course, the development in China and their need for steel and iron ore and coking coal. But, of course, India is developing just as rapidly as China. So, certainly over the years to come, do you think that India is going to be a much more significant trading partner for Australia as it develops?
Yes, our government have said quite consistently that India should move into one of the key important strategic partners, and that was stated by the Indian and Australian Prime Ministers when they met in November of last year. Coming off a lower base and perhaps less engagement over a longer period of time than some of our traditional trading partners, the pickup with India over the last 2 to 3 to 5 years has been significant, and that is definitely a trend that's going to continue. India's GDP, even during the economic crisis, only dropped to 6.5. It's now up above 7. The Indian government have said 8.5 in the year ahead, heading towards double digit and sustained over a long period of time. So you'll see India by 2030 and certainly by 2050 the top 3 economies in the world, together with the US and China.
Yeah, on that, there's been a lot of talk that India's growth is more sustainable than China. Is that a view that you share?
I can't really comment too much about China. That's not my space and my field. But I can tell you that in India, with a growing population, with very high domestic demand, so there's not as much exposure to global markets, and that's why India fared so well during the recent economic crisis. And in terms of their trade surplus, they actually had a trade surplus in India's benefit during that period of time, because the value of their imports, which were primarily oil, dropped by more than the value of their exports. So there was a net trade gain for them. And domestic demand remained very strong.
You made a good point there about domestic demand. Certainly their population is forecast to grow very quickly, and certainly grow faster than China's population growth. That population of growth, it really is a driver for demand and for imports into India, isn't it?
In two factors. I mean, firstly, China has a one-child policy, so their population growth does have to level off. India does not have that, and so depending on whose analysis you want to look at, by 2025 to 2040, somewhere in that period, India will overtake China in population total numbers. But more importantly is the demographic dividend, and it's a very young population, with 50% of the population in India presently under the age of 25. So the working percentage of the population and the stress in terms of the government in terms of social reliance is much less, and that's going to contribute to a growing GDP and demand for goods.